Well, I was muted, but now I'm not. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. Today we are talking about conspiracies, conspiracy theories, criminal conspiracies, and a conspiracy to turn the Department of Homeland Security into a tool of the president's repression. We will start today in talking about the latest developments related to the FBI's raid of an election office in Georgia. Crucial new developments as the search warrant was released. And then fresh fallout from the Epstein files, including major questions about associates of Jeffrey Epstein in the Trump administration, the truth or lack thereof about their relationships with the disgraced financier, and also lingering questions about Jeffrey Epstein's relationship with foreign intelligence agencies. And finally, a tense hearing today on Capitol Hill where the immigration chiefs for the Department of Homeland Security were brought up and revealed the true purpose of their mandate from the President of the United States. And with us later to talk about all of this will be Sidney Blumenthal, former senior White House official and advisor to the Clintons. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. We start tonight with Fulton County, Georgia. We've got new details on the federal investigation into Georgia's 2020 election results. A newly unsealed court filing shows the FBI raid that seized ballots in Fulton County was triggered by a referral from former Trump campaign lawyer Kurt Olson. According to the affidavit, Olson sent the referral that launched a criminal investigation into whether alleged problems in Fulton County's 2020 vote were intentional violations of federal law. That affidavit was written by an FBI special agent named Hugh Raymond Evans, and it was unsealed Tuesday by a federal judge in Atlanta. It states in part that the FBI is examining whether ballot handling and tabulation issues, some previously disproven and others acknowledged by the county, were the result of deliberate misconduct. Among the issues cited, missing scanned images for tens of thousands of ballots, ballots scanned more than once during the recount, conflicting vote tallies reported by the county on consecutive days. The document itself, the affidavit, makes clear even if those issues did not change the election outcome, intentional acts would still violate federal law. Now, the filing also confirms that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was present during the January 28 FBI seizure of ballots at the county election center. Gabbard has said she was there at President Trump's direction, and Trump has said she attended at the insistence of Attorney General Pam Bondi. Democratic lawmakers are now raising alarms, accusing the administration of reviving discredited election claims and undermining confidence ahead of the midterms. Two Democratic senators are demanding an immediate intelligence briefing on election security, calling the investigation unprecedented and unsupported by verified intelligence. In fact, Fulton County officials are suing the federal government to recover the seized ballots. This is becoming a much, much bigger controversy. One of the reasons cited by experts is that if there were violations of federal law, a lot of those violations are now outside of the statute of limitations. Why did the federal government wait more than 5 years past 2020 to bring these allegations if this information has been out there so long? A second piece that I alluded to is the conspiracies. In fact, people have pointed out, and I myself read the affidavit before coming on the air, and it includes totally discredited conspiracy theories that over the course of years have been proven not to be real, including the allegation that in Fulton County, there were double scanned ballots to try to count more votes for Joe Biden, that there were masses of dead voters casting ballots through ballot harvesting schemes, that the machines themselves were overcounting, all things that have been reviewed and audited by state officials of both political parties and struck down, yet incredibly have found their way into an affidavit by an FBI agent to go search Fulton County and those facilities and to seize those ballots. Mere weeks after the President of the United States lamented in a New York Times interview that he didn't seize them when he had the chance in 2020. Another comment, Stanford law professor Oren Kerr wrote on social media in the drafting of a search warrant affidavit, the Fourth Amendment requires the inclusion of facts that would negate probable cause. The government cannot pick facts that, if true, could support a finding of probable cause, but omit the facts that cancel. Why is this important? Well, because there's a lot of information out there to negate what was in the FBI affidavit. Information that apparently the FBI chose not to share with the magistrate judge that issued the search warrant. Believe me, folks, this controversy is going to continue to spiral. And the biggest question of all, hovering over this entire thing, is that this is potentially an unconstitutional federal recount of an election. The ballots have been seized. The President of the United States has suggested in the Oval Office that the agents are going to use these ballots to determine who was the, quote, true winner of the election in 2020. And none of that, of course, is supported by the evidence or supported by the filings that were put in front of a magistrate judge. And now, just moments ago, Donald Trump warned that more states in this country can expect the same.
That we're looking at California too, because California is worse. But you know, if we find 50%, look, they've been robbing and ripping off this country for many years, for decades, right? If we find 50% of what's happened, we have a balanced budget without cutting anybody. We have a balanced budget. And we'll find that Minnesota is very corrupt. California is very corrupt. A lot of states are very corrupt.
I'm going to bring into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. Xander, this is in a sense the sum of all fears, is the president admitting that they're going to go into other states. We're looking at California. Looking at California for what? Discredited conspiracy theories are going to be submitted to judges to go raid the election offices of these places. This really is, I know we say 5-alarm fire a lot. This is a 5-alarm fire. The federal government is actively trying to insert itself in elections in Democratic areas or areas the president lost for dubious purposes.
We do say 5-alarm fire a lot, but I feel like this is that window between 1896 to 1904 where like Chicago and San Francisco and 15 other major American cities burned down. We're in one of those windows, but for democracy. There's just a lot of 5-alarm fires right now. You mentioned that this has been discredited. I think I just want to point out, just to the extent that it's been discredited, there were 62 lawsuits filed in battleground states that had various kind of election claims. 61 cases failed. There was one minor victory for the Trumps on this like procedural thing in Pennsylvania that it by no means showed that there was election fraud at a high level. 62 cases, 61 failed. And so this is not something that, was in front of one or two judges and they dismissed the case. 9 of the judges in those cases were appointed by Trump himself. So when people talk about radical left judges dismissing these cases, 9 were his appointees. Another 20-something were Republican appointees. So this was not a kind of, this has been reviewed by the professionals over and over and over again. I just want to point out, this is part of the authoritarian playbook. Everyone from Hitler and Mussolini to Fujimori and Chavez spent years casting doubts on their election systems before taking power and after taking power, because it gives them this, heads I win, tails you lose scenario where, excuse me.
No, take the call. Just take the call. Let's see who it is. Surprise them that they're going to be on the live stream.
You know who it is? Actually, our guest John Wood Jr., who wasn't able to join the live stream twice. So John,
oh man, and now he's trying to call in. Sorry, John. You got to join through a stable internet connection. Those are the rules here at Defiance Daily.
Those are the rules. We don't want to tell you again.
Those are the rules. We'll put you back on track. The dictator's playbook.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's this kind of heads I win, tails you lose scenario where if they win an election in a corrupt system, they've overcome massive odds, even if their victory is very narrow, and they have this massive mandate to do what they need to do. If they lose, it's because of corruption. They should overthrow the government. They should take power, and it legitimizes their power grab. So like the Trump administration knows they're wrong here. That's not the point of this. The point of this is just to continue to sow distrust in this system, and so they can claim they've been robbed when they're eventually beaten, or act like they have this overwhelming majority supporting them when they have narrow victories.
Well, I'm going to say this is very clearly shaping up to be worse than 2020. I mean, without a doubt. And here's why. And we said this a little bit on our piece this morning on Defiance News, is in 2020, you had a president claiming the election was stolen from him. At the last minute, Republicans weren't prepared to defend that. They didn't really agree with the president. They kind of got on board over the course of it, realizing that this might be a way to, to keep, power, potentially in Washington. But it all fell apart because, as you noted, Xander, all of these claims were based on totally dubious assumptions and lack of evidence, and they were struck down in the courts. What's different about 2026 is they're starting now. In fact, they started last year, and they're seeding this narrative, and the president's team is taking voting machines and preparing to make claims that the voting machines are insecure and therefore laying the predicate potentially for federal seizure. They're sending FBI agents into these offices and setting a precedent that federal agents can just go into state and local election offices and take their ballots. They're starting to point to other states. They are creating this aura of doubt over the election so that when and if the MAGA side loses, Donald Trump has a zillion reasons to claim that there was fraud. And as we wrote about this morning, the thing that's especially worrying about that is that they don't even necessarily need to prove any of these cases this time. They just need to create enough doubt for the House of Representatives and Speaker Mike Johnson to say, well, you know what? These people who won these seats and beat our guys, we're not going to seat them. We're not going to swear them in. There's too much controversy. The FBI says it's under investigation. We're just not going to do it. And then death of democracy, folks. Time of death right there. That's a really, really scary thing if it happens. And there is an answer to what can I do about it, which is a lot. There's a lot we can do. There's a lot people are doing. We'll talk about some of that today with our guests. And Xander, you and I will talk about some of it. But one of the things we are trying to do is to make sure the teams that are suing the federal government for these illegal invasions and seizures of ballots have the support they need, but also that people are getting the right information on the ground when it comes to voting, because that's the other tool that this administration is going to use to try to make sure the result is close, rather than what many people expect, which is probably a blowout for the political opposition.
Yeah, our members are going to be hearing kind of two strategies over and over and over again. Too big to rig. I think Miles Taylor coined the phrase. I'm not sure. I heard it first from you.
Someone else could have independently also come up with it, but I'm going to give my wife some credit. She said that over dinner the other night.
You were incepted by your wife. I got it. All right, so too big to rig and protect the vote. Those are the two things that we are going to overwhelmingly focus on as we move towards the midterms. I'm sure, as the Trump administration continues to embrace Muslim philosophy, there'll be other things we have to react to. But I think those are going to be kind of the beats of the drum that we keep dancing to over the course of the next year leading into the midterms.
Yeah. Oh, man. I love the mixed metaphors there. We're going to be dancing to the beats of the drum, and there's Muslim philosophy. It's going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of things there. You're absolutely right. And look, I'll use this as the moment to give people a call to action that are watching. Seriously, if you want to help us protect this election, go to defiance.org. This is not a, donate now to save the animals. That's important. I hope you are saving animals that are endangered. This is a democracy that is endangered. We are a nonprofit club working to protect that democracy, and our members have decided this is the most important focus for 2026 for our organization. We take actions every single week to combat Trump's abuses of power, real actions, not just doom scrolling. And tomorrow, Wednesday, is the day that we announce those actions. Tune in tomorrow to Defiance Daily, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, where we are going to be rolling out our action this week, which is going to be focused on massive turnout in these elections, massive turnout to make sure that the pro-democracy side wins, that we protect the rule of law in this country. So please like, subscribe, follow. You can sign up for free for our updates at defiance.org and become a member if you want to contribute to those actions and that mission. Now, we said the theme today was conspiracies, and I want to go on to another one, which is the big conspiracy theory that's been consuming Washington, and that is related to Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein files. And over the weekend, the FBI released a very unusual statement that, to their findings, quote, Jeffrey Epstein was not running a sex trafficking ring for powerful men, unquote. And that they have officially released all of the Epstein files. That's the position of the U.S. Department of Justice. In response, members of the House Judiciary Committee have fought for and now partially received unredacted copies of the Epstein files and access to unreleased files, because this wasn't true. The administration hadn't released all of the files. It had released all of the files it wanted to. And according to people on Capitol Hill, kept millions of files unreleased. They gave members access to a secure facility where one member of Congress noted it might take literal years to read every document. But even that effort was stymied by the administration. As Representative Jamie Raskin tweeted, here's his tweet, the DOJ is giving members of Congress just 4 computers in a satellite office to read the unredacted Epstein files of more than 3 million documents. Here was his math on this. Working 40 hours a week on nothing else but this, it would take more than 7 years for the 217 members of Congress who signed the House discharge petition to read just the documents they've decided to release. And there are 3 million still being withheld. The administration says this is what transparency looks like. I would say this is what a cover-up looks like. Yet some files were reviewed in that secure facility, and with it has come what seems to be one of the biggest aspects of the fallout yet, a bipartisan understanding that the Department of Justice did conceal the names of powerful men associated with Jeffrey Epstein.
Congresswoman, are you among the members who got to see the unredacted files today?
Yes, I saw some of them, not all of them, obviously. And I'll be going back tomorrow to see more.
Any reaction on what you've seen so far?
I think that there's folks who are definitely implicated and co-conspirators. And, I don't think everyone there that was talking about underage girls being trafficked are victims.
Got it. And do you support any clemency for Ghislaine Maxwell? She was saying that
I do not. Okay. I think Ghislaine Maxwell should get more time, and she should definitely be in a harsher prison than what she's in. It's absolutely disgusting.
Got it. Thank you, Congresswoman.
We know that there are multiple administration officials, including Howard Lutnick, Elon Musk, who served as the appointee for the DOJ efforts in the White House. We know that the Secretary of Navy. We know that Steve Bannon. We know that there are more than 36 associates, family members, and individuals directly associated with Donald Trump named in those files. Now, there are now at least 9 or 10 other countries across the world that have opened investigations or forced their leaders to step down because of their mere association with Jeffrey Epstein.
Congresswoman, real quick, you said that you do not support at all Ghislaine Maxwell getting any clemency for her testimony. And why is it important for her to be held accountable?
Well, because according to the files that we all saw, she was engaged in the trafficking and also rape of young women and potentially children. I don't think that she deserves any special treatment. She's a monster.
And are you going to...
On top of all of that, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick faced bipartisan calls for his resignation today after being grilled on Capitol Hill over his ties to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Lutnick appeared before the Senate Appropriations Committee just weeks after newly released Justice Department records showed that he maintained personal and business connections to Epstein for years after Epstein's 2008 conviction for soliciting a minor. Democratic lawmakers accused Lutnick of misleading Congress, the public, and Epstein's survivors about the extent of that relationship. One notable moment underlying this deception is from an episode of Pod Force One in October of 2025, in which Lutnick had this to say on his relationship with Epstein.
He opens the doors, and there's a massage table in the middle of the room. And candles all around and stuff. So I ask very insightful, cutting questions. I say to him, massage table in the middle of your house? How often you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me. Ooh. And he says, and the right kind of massage. Ooh. Now my wife is standing here. So she looks at me and I look at her and we say, I'm sorry. We have to go. And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross. And so I look back at it as a gift.
Yes.
He gave me a gift.
Yes.
Of a voice. And so, yeah, that's my story. A one and absolutely done.
A one and absolutely done. Totally revolted by the guy. Had nothing to do with him after that. And yet today, Senator Chris Van Hollen once again pressed Lutnick to disclose the true nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. There, Lutnick seemed to finally admit he knew Jeffrey Epstein more than he let on.
Responses with respect to the Epstein files, specifically the visit you and your family took to Epstein's private island in 2012, and I think you also said you went on his yacht. Is that right? Or boat? No.
No.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
At that time, I think you mentioned that you were accompanied by your wife and kids and nannies. My question is, do you know whether the nanny that you had on that trip was the same nanny that Jeffrey Epstein expressed interest in meeting?
No, I have no idea about that whole thing. I mean, I don't recall it having anything to do with me, and I don't know that.
It's just, you know, this guy was a convicted sex offender, and obviously not a great place for kids and nannies. Was Ghislaine Maxwell on the island at that time?
No.
Let's again remember that Howard Lutnick took those 8 very powerful steps out of that massage room and said, I want nothing to do with this man. And yet, records also show that shortly after that trip, Lutnick and Jeffrey Epstein invested in the same private company together, and that Epstein later attempted to contact Lutnick about real estate deals. This, according to the documents that were released. And additional documents show that Epstein donated $50,000 to a New York charity in Lutnick's honor in 2017, and that Lutnick appeared to invite Epstein to a private fundraising event in 2015. Again, I want to point you back to Lutnick's comments in that Pod Force 1 episode where he said they then had nothing to do with business and charity together. So Lutnick apparently downplayed those connections, saying there were about 10 emails over 14 years and insisting he, quote, barely had anything to do with Epstein. Lawmakers from both parties remained unconvinced. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie said Lutnick should resign, arguing his continued presence is a liability for the administration. At one point, Senator Chris Coons seemed to even offer a way out for Lutnick. Just tell the truth, he said. Take a look.
But it troubles me that you took your family to lunch on his island, that you had appointments with him. Please disclose everything. Put this to rest, because this is an issue of grave concern to my constituents. President Trump ran on releasing the Epstein files. You said casually, well, I looked at my name and how it appeared in them, as does everyone. No, everyone isn't worried about their names being in the Epstein files. I know he was your neighbor. That was a coincidence. But please disclose everything that's relevant here so that we have a chance to work together and move on.
Despite all the evidence laid out in today's hearing, Lutnick continues to deny any wrongdoing, and as expressed by Caroline Leavitt today at the White House, that the president supports him entirely. At the same press conference, and in light of Ghislaine Maxwell pleading the fifth in response to all questions asked in a closed-door virtual deposition before the House Oversight Committee on Monday, Leavitt was questioned on the possibility this may have been a quid pro quo arranged by the White House.
And if they don't want to, that's their loss.
And on Ghislaine Maxwell, is the president going to rule out a pardon for her in her testimony deposition yesterday? Her legal team seemed to be making a case again for a pardon from the president.
Again, this is not something I've discussed with the president recently because, frankly, it's not a priority. He's focused on many of the issues that the American people are dealing with and providing solutions to those issues. So I haven't spoken with him recently. Last time we did speak about it, he said it's not something he's considering or thinking about. Caroline. Go ahead, Bloomberg.
Thanks, Caroline.
Frankly, not a priority. Words that will surely come back to haunt them. I bring back into the conversation Xander Schultz. Xander, your reaction to all of this.
Isn't it jarring to have these two stories back to back? Just how unevenly our justice system is being wielded. That we have the Trump administration going on this witch hunt, despite these 60 cases failing to find any evidence that there was some sort of election fraud.
Yeah.
and then you come here where there's eyewitness testimony, photos, DNA evidence, victim testimony, just this mountain of evidence, not just against Lutnick, but against Trump himself. I honestly like the cowardice to always avoid going after Trump from the Republican Party, but being, happy to show a little bit of solidarity, a little bit like they're against corruption when they go after a Lutnick or whatnot. It seems like Lutnick was close to the guy. Trump is literally his best friend for years. And there's mountains and mountains of evidence around this. So it's just one of the hallmarks of authoritarianism is a justice system that's wielded politically and unfairly. We are seeing that in spades right now across these two stories. We've reported these two stories back to back a few days now. It's jarring.
You point to something really important, I think, Xander, which is, yes, we should care about the victims. Yes, we should care about the Justice Department engaging in a cover-up, but we should also care about how the government acts when one of its own or some of its own might be implicated.
Yes.
Is two different tiers of justice, two actual different tiers of justice. That undermines overall public confidence in democracy. That may sound abstract to people. Well, it's not abstract when sometimes the bad guys don't go to prison and the good guys or the victims are left harmed for the rest of their lives. This has real implications for real people. And the administration is showing us in about the biggest side-by-side you could possibly see that it has two dramatically different tiers of justice. Zero accountability for a guy and all the people who associated with him who committed untold numbers of crimes, but focused attention from the highest levels of the federal government about conspiracy theories that, if heeded, could undermine the democratic rights of millions of Americans and the legitimacy of their vote. Extraordinary.
I hope we keep hammering this topic because as the congressperson mentioned, this was part of the mandate Trump was elected on. It was releasing the Epstein files, exposing the corruption, protecting children, right? Whether it was genuine or not, him making that part of his platform. It was part of his platform and specifically resonant with his base. And so part of our job, part of the pro-democracy movement's job, and the broadening tent that we're starting to acquire as Trump loses support is to continue to put these facts in front of people and let Trump's corruption, let the regime's corruption ostracize themselves from their base. I spoke to, I don't want to go on too long here, but I spoke to a guy who ran as a Republican in Oregon just before this call. And I told him what I'm up to. And he said, well, the left always says Trump's an authoritarian. I feel like they don't like anything he does and they call it authoritarian. I talked to him about him suing the IRS for $10 billion. I talked to him about him nationalizing the election. I talked about what's going on with the Epstein files. He didn't know about any of it. This guy's plugged in. He ran for office. He literally didn't know about any of it. And so our job, I think journalists are doing a freaking incredible job against all odds to unearth these facts. Our job as a pro-democracy movement is to make sure it's heard. And we can't assume just because we're hearing it on repeat, because you come to shows like ours, that a lot of other folks are hearing it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I would also say, one other thing before we bring our guest in that I want to highlight, Xander, that in just the past couple of days shows that these aren't just misplaced worries about the Epstein files. And that is all of the emerging evidence that there's a bigger national security story here, in addition to the abuse victims. That should be the focus. The victims of Jeffrey Epstein, potential co-conspirators. There are people named in the documents as co-conspirators. And we know that last year, as soon as Trump came into office, that SDNY investigation was dropped. DOJ said, stop it, send us all the files. They ended it and they said nothing to see here. Well, there's people listed as co-conspirators. The investigation wasn't done. But in addition to that, Xander, in the past few days, we have seen more indications that Jeffrey Epstein had relationships with foreign intelligence agencies or people tied to foreign intelligence agencies. And what is not at all clear to me is that the FBI did anything to make sure that Jeffrey Epstein did not pose an intelligence threat to the United States of America. I haven't seen any evidence that the FBI went and interviewed people for what we would call CI concerns, counterintelligence. Mm-hmm. If this guy really was being paid by the KGB, if he really was working for Israeli intelligence, well, then he was engaging with the top CEOs in the United States, former American presidents, potentially collating very sensitive information that could be used to undermine the United States. When that happens, and there's a CI investigation, at a minimum, you go interview all of those people who had interacted with that target so you can get a sense of what the potential landscape of compromise is. It doesn't look like any of that happened there. And then you add on to that, Xander, there are suspicious references into these files, including Jeffrey Epstein saying to Steve Bannon that he had to go because he was going into a SCIF while they were texting. A SCIF is a secure compartmented information facility. That's a classified information facility that the U.S. government runs. Now, we don't know. Here's the text message. We don't know if that Epstein was saying that colloquially. Some people say SCIF. You know, it's made its way into parlance for people to refer to, you know, a place where they're not going to bring their phone as a SCIF, even if it isn't. But I find this incredibly suspicious. Also today, someone else found another file that the FBI redacted everything on the page except for the words Epstein SCIF takeover. This is very, very, very interesting and concerning, folks, is that there are these indicators that Jeffrey Epstein has awareness of, familiarity with, or engagement with sensitive U.S. government classified facilities, and nothing is being said about that from this administration. So I said yesterday, Xander, I hate to admit it when the wacky conspiracy theorists are right. And years ago when people were saying, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, he might have been an asset of intelligence and people are lying, I thought, okay, ignore that. Well, damn it, where there's smoke, there's fire. And we're seeing a hell of a lot of smoke here.
You beat me to it. I was just going to say, we're never going to recover on the conspiracy theory front. You were just talking about it. You're like, no, it's like QAnon, crazy when you dig into the details. Directionally correct. It's going to be challenging to come back from that.
I know. Well, I want to bring in our guest to talk about this and all the other stories of the day. We have with us the incredible Sidney Blumenthal, a best-selling author, former senior White House official, advisor to President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and also one of the hosts on the Legal AF podcast, The Court of History. Sidney Blumenthal, welcome to Defiance Daily.
Thanks, Miles. Glad to be here.
Great to have you, my friend. Can I get your reaction to the latest on Epstein, Sidney? Because this is something that I have felt like every week, well, the story has reached the end of its new development stage. Not that accountability won't continue to happen, but there just continues to be new disclosures all the time, which further increase the very, very, very suspect decision of this administration to just shut down the investigation.
Well, they're breaking the law right now. There are more than 3 million documents that they're withholding that by law they're supposed to release. And the Department of Justice said, we're done, but they're not, they're illegal in their suppression of the more than 3 million documents. Jamie Raskin says that Trump appears thousands upon thousands of times in those documents. We have no idea in what context or what they say, but they are certainly engaged in a cover-up, and it is illegal. It's an obstruction.
I want to ask you, Sidney and Xander, then I'll throw it over to you. In the big picture, how do you think this scandal will be seen? Xander and I were talking about how this very clearly diminishes the public's confidence in the rule of law. But it also seems to be so much worse in that it shows an American president now in the modern age can apparently suppress whatever he or she wants and enforce the law however he or she wants, especially with personal advantage to them. That seems to be a precedent that's now been set that won't just affect the feelings of Americans about their democracy, but the actual execution of it and the actual implementation of the justice system and law enforcement.
Well, I would say in terms of history, which is long, we're at the beginning, not in the middle and not at the end of this. And eventually there will be likely a Democratic Congress, and they will subpoena all the remaining records, and we'll see if DOJ then stonewalls that. And there may well be a Democratic president, and then they'll all be thrown on the White House lawn. So we're going to get these records one way or another, whether or not Trump is suppressing them right now, and we'll have an idea of what is in those records. And by no means is that even the full picture, because the Epstein files deal with the legal matters that surround Epstein, and there's much more to know than simply that. There's Donald Trump's relationship to the entire model industry, with which he had an intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein as they were hunting women and engaging in business, setting up modeling agencies that enabled them to have access to young women. And that is a whole other aspect that we're not discussing right now and hasn't come out, and some of which may be in the documents or referred to. For example, Jean-Luc Brunel is mentioned as among the people in the files. Who is Jean-Luc Brunel? Well, he ran a Paris modeling agency. He was close to both Epstein and Trump. He lived for a while in Trump Tower, and he engaged in a modeling business at one point with Epstein. Brunel died hanging himself, very much like Epstein, in 2022 in a Paris jail cell, having been arrested and indicted for human trafficking and rape. This is an associate of Donald Trump, long time, and of Jeffrey Epstein. I would posit that Jeffrey Epstein is simply one of the Jeffrey Epsteins who are in Donald Trump's life that we have not focused on. And Jean-Luc Brunel is one of them. You will also note, Miles, that in the release of the Epstein files, there's a picture of Jean-Luc Brunel, and he's not wearing a shirt. He's half naked, and he's being embraced by Brett Ratner. Who is Brett Ratner? Well, it turns out he is somebody who was basically driven out of Hollywood because of accusations of his sexual misconduct. And he then turns up as the director of the documentary Melania. So what's the backstory here with this person who is hugging Jean-Luc Brunel, a human trafficker and rapist, who's close to Trump and Epstein, and then winds up chosen by Melania Trump to be the director of her documentary? What's her association with Brett Ratner and this entire world? So there are a lot of avenues that are yet to be explored here.
I'm so happy you brought up the modeling agencies they were associated with. Trump was the owner of Miss Teen USA from 96 to 2015 for 20 years. What is Miss Teen USA? It's a beauty pageant for girls 14 to 19. Miles, if you told me, hey, I bought a business check it out. This is what it's up to. I love you, man. That's the end of our friendship. It's nukes. That's insane business to own. So I'm so happy you brought that up. You talked about eventual justice with a Dem Congress or a Dem White House. What is most important to happen from now until then? If justice is delayed, what should the major players be doing to ensure justice is eventually served from now until then?
Well, people should keep demanding the release of the files, and they should not let up. And they should keep going through these files and pulling on the strings. Here's another parallel that is not discussed in the United States. Peter Mandelson has the former ambassador from the UK to the US, has almost brought down the Starmer government in because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that he hid various aspects of his relationship with Epstein from the British government. Who does that sound like? It sounds a lot like Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick is the parallel figure, more or less, to Peter Mandelson. Now, the British government is teetering on the edge of extinction because of this one relationship that an ambassador had. Here's Howard Lutnick, a member of the cabinet, who brazenly lied. And it wasn't simply that he lied. He created an interview in which he put out a false story in order to exonerate himself from his relationship with Epstein, knowing full well that it was much deeper than he was portraying it. And that, in fact, he had gone to Epstein's Island with his family and that he had had an extensive relationship with Epstein. And we still don't know the extent of that relationship. And there's more to learn about Howard Lutnick as well. There was an item early on in the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, reported in the New York Times. It was buried in the business section. But I know somebody who was a businessman who was present at a meeting with Lutnick when he was introducing himself to Washington. And he got up and he started boasting about his relationship with Donald Trump. And he said, well, Donald Trump and I used to run around and chase women together. That's how close we are. Well, that strikes me not without interest, given his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein as well. And I would also say, I saw the hearing of Howard Lutnick, and Chris Coons, the senator, said, you couldn't help the fact that you own the house next to Jeffrey Epstein. But I think that there's a lot more to learn about that, to be explored, because I believe that Howard Lutnick got a sweetheart deal on that house, and that Les Wexner, who's one of the key co-conspirators and financiers of Jeffrey Epstein and one of his close associates, was involved in the financing of Howard Lutnick buying that house. And
it can't be, Sidney, it can't just be coincidental. There's nearly 7 billion people on the planet. He just happened to be living next to the most famous convicted pedophile on earth. I mean, that just strikes me as bizarre.
Well, how was the financing done of his purchase of that property when he moved on 71st Street next to Jeffrey Epstein? That needs to be explored. So there's a lot more to be learned about Howard Lutnick. And he is still stonewalling how deep his relationship was with Epstein, including a financial relationship.
Sidney, I totally agree with you that we should keep digging and exploring these connections. But I got to say, it's insanely frustrating that we need more than the dozens of women who are testifying that they were victimized by these guys. I appreciate the forensic investigations and all those things. Why do we need more than dozens of living humans that said I was victimized, that have mountains of evidence around it? And this isn't, Sidney, this isn't your fault. We should keep pressing on all the channels. It's just infuriating that we keep talking about this guy who's holding two guns. They're both smoking. And we're like, well, if we go back a ways and look at this picture of who he is standing next to, we have, yeah. And so, like, I know "believe women" is like, became a catchphrase on the left, but this is why it became a catchphrase, because God damn it, why do we need more than dozens of women saying they were abused by these people? It's so frustrating.
I also got to say, when you said chasing women, Sidney, that's the first time I've ever heard that phrase and thought, wow, it sure takes on a really menacing connotation in hindsight. When you see these guys talk, we were chasing women. Now it sounds more like we were chasing women. I mean, given everything, I mean, just very predatory.
Also, the word women's doing a lot of work there. It's most likely girls.
So my friend who was present at this meeting when Lutnick spoke said that this group of people that included a lot of business people and lobbyists and lawyers in Washington and the usual, types were shocked at his self-presentation and his vulgarity. And even for the Trump people, he stood out as being exceptionally vulgar. So there's more to be learned about Mr. Lutnick here.
Well, I also want to say, Sidney, I mean, tying this to the story that we talked about before it and the election, there is something that is happening here that gives me a little bit of optimism, which is that when the justice system fails, people are taking it on themselves to make sure that the truth comes out. And there's a lot that we all know is bad about the current moment of social media mobs, but we also have this extraordinary fact that some of the most interesting finds that should lead to investigative action have been from the public, crowdsourcing the review of the Epstein files, making connections that the FBI clearly missed. I mean, just given what you've seen people on social media uncover, you have more than enough to reopen the investigation. More leads, more people who haven't been spoken to, more potential criminal conduct. And then you compare that to what we just talked about with the elections, where some already disproven bogus conspiracy theories are actually leading the federal government to take action and engage in search warrants in our elections. If only we could get the federal government to actually care about real evidence and real crimes. I want to get your thoughts on that, just the crowdsourcing of this investigation, but also get your thoughts, Sidney, on threats to our election in general and what we're seeing, because I know you have been doing a lot of thinking and having a lot of conversations on that subject.
Yeah. So first, let's just talk about Epstein and then about elections. About Epstein, there are still a lot of reporters working on this, and the crowdsourcing is really important if people can sift through this and dig out information. But just the other day, Julie K. Brown, who really broke the Epstein story at the Miami Herald, had another story in which there's a report from the sheriff in Palm Beach and questioning Donald Trump, who says everyone knew about Epstein. Well, everybody did not know about Epstein. And what that shows is that Trump knew about Epstein. And it suggests that he knew about him for a long time, and not simply his false story that he broke up with Epstein because he had recruited a girl from the Mar-a-Lago spa, which is refuted by Michael Wolff saying that in a conversation with Jeffrey Epstein, Epstein said the reason that they broke off had to do with a real estate deal in Palm Beach in which Trump intervened on a property that Epstein was going to buy. So that was at a different time than what Trump claimed. Now, in the election story, just in the larger sense, the worse it gets for Trump and the more unpopular he is, and he is the most unpopular president of modern times, the worse he gets and the more he attacks the election system. His problem is this is not a federal system. This is run by the states. So he has said he wants to nationalize the elections. There's no means to do that. So he has to attack the states. And how he is going to do that, a lot of which we don't quite know yet. And it may be that he is going to attack the election system in the states all the way through, including after the election. He's talked about seizing ballot boxes. Who would he use to do that? What would the courts do when he did that? Will he use ICE? Will he invoke the military? He has talked about the Insurrection Act. Will he invoke that in order to stop a tidal wave election that rejects him and the Republicans? So right now, the watchword is eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And everybody needs to be on guard if they wish to protect their own vote and that of every other American.
Sidney, we're way into overtime, but I just need to ask you this in parting. You are one of the great living scholars of Abraham Lincoln. You have written more than, I think you've probably put down more words than anyone alive right now about Abraham Lincoln. You are a huge student of his. You've written best-selling tomes about his. You're working on another one. Abraham Lincoln risked it all to try to keep the republic together. What would Lincoln say about this moment, in your view? I suppose there are a few people living who could lay claim to better understanding what the man might have thought than you, and would just love your take on that. And he can't contradict you because, of course, he can't.
Well, Lincoln understood that what was at stake was democracy itself. He regarded the creation of the Confederacy through secession as a direct attack on democracy, a refusal to accept a free and fair election. By the way, during that election, his name was kept off the ballot in almost all of the southern states, so that he received not a single vote there. He was never on the ballot, nor were a lot of people allowed to vote. Needless to say, women, of course, couldn't vote then, but neither could the enslaved people. So Lincoln understood this to be a battle for democracy. He called it a people's contest on whether or not that government, which is devoted to the general welfare, to lift people up so that everybody has an equal opportunity in life, can survive. And that is how he saw it. He reframed that time and time again, including in the Gettysburg Address, about the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and whether it could survive. And we face a similar crisis in our own time, and it is really up to us. And we need to understand that we have behind us the history and the spirits of Lincoln, and also the founders of those who made the American Revolution, fighting against an absolute ruler. And that's what we have on our side.
Sidney Blumenthal, a national treasure, thank you for joining us. I hope you'll come back to Defiance Daily, good sir.
Thank you.
Powerful words about Lincoln, and I would shudder to think what Abraham Lincoln would think about our last story of the day. With Congress just days away from approving or blocking federal funding for the Department of Homeland Security, the House Homeland Security Committee held a very tense hearing, forcing top immigration officials to testify. Ahead of the Friday funding deadline, lawmakers questioned Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE, and Rodney Scott, the commissioner of CBP, as well as Joseph Edlow, director of CIS. Democrats pressed officials on the validity and necessity of the extreme enforcement tactics we have seen used by federal agents against immigrants, against American citizens, against innocent people. And Republicans largely fell in line, defending the agencies and the administration's brutal approach to its immigration crackdown. The hearing marked their first major congressional appearance together since 2 U.S. citizens were killed by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis. Lawmakers on the Democratic side repeatedly raised the deaths of Renee Good and 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy, who was fatally shot during one of those encounters. Despite repeated questions, Lyons and other officials refused to directly address the shootings, citing ongoing investigations and declining to apologize. Here is Representative Eric Swalwell and Todd Lyons.
Director Lyons, last year you said in Phoenix at the Border Security Expo that you wanted to see a deportation process that was like, quote, Amazon Prime, but with human beings. Mr. Lyons, how many times has Amazon Prime shot a mom 3 times in the face?
None, sir, but you're also...
It's the square root of 0, that's right.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but if we're going to go down that route of my comment, I did say that comment. However, that comment was taken out. If you go back and watch the video, I did say that we need to be more efficient when it comes to removing individuals from the United States, because ICE doesn't detain punitively. We detain to remove. I don't want to see people in custody. At the end of my statement was, again, to your point, it was a industry day for AI and efficiencies. But I did say at the end of it, but we deal with human beings, so we can't be like them.
And speaking
That's
of
the key part that you're leaving out.
Well, speaking of human beings, how many times has Amazon Prime shot a nurse 10 times in the back?
None.
How many times has Amazon Prime dragged a woman out of her car by her hair and then dragged her down the street?
None.
How many ICE agents have been fired for their conduct under your leadership?
Sir, I can get you that data. I'll get that back to you.
Is it more than 1?
I'm not going to speak about personnel actions, but I'll get you that data.
Can you tell us?
Well, we've got the head of ICE talking about the immigration system as basically a conveyor belt of human carnage. I don't think you can really blame Democrats for giving him a hard time. Democrats also accused DHS of running roughshod over civil liberties and warned of unchecked federal power. Let's take a look at the response when the threat of adding Americans to a database of terrorists came up. But I want to note that we went ahead and pulled another clip as a callback to these exact tactics.
U.S. citizens today?
No, sir.
Those people practicing the First Amendment right, photos of them, data taken, they're not being placed in any kind of a database?
There is no database for protesters, sir.
One of your officers in Maine said to one of the individuals protesting, we're going to put your face in a little database. What does that mean? Do you have a little database of Americans?
No, sir, we don't.
Then what do you think your ICE agent was doing to this individual when he said those statements?
I can't speak for that individual, sir, but I can assure you there is no database that's tracking United States citizens.
Sir.
What you guys are doing here? Yeah. Look at them. Look at them. The ICE is here, guys. Be careful. Be careful. Be over here.
It's not illegal to record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Why are you taking my information down?
Because we have a nice little database.
Oh, good.
And now you're considered a domestic terrorist. So
We're videotaping you? Are you crazy?
So a great follow-up question would have been, if ICE is holding people accountable, is it holding this officer accountable? If there is actually no database, should ICE officers be telling Americans that their names are going into a terrorist database? What happened to that officer? We still don't have answers. In the end, during this hearing, Lyons' testimony captured the moment. Here was the bombshell quote. The president tasked us with mass deportations, Lyons said, and we are fulfilling that mandate. Those were his words. To critics, that statement right there, that statement confirmed what the hearing was trying to go after, that the aggressive enforcement is not a mistake. It is not a defect. It is the feature. It is the policy. And with DHS funding on the line, today's hearing exposed how far apart lawmakers remain on accountability and oversight and the human cost of immigration enforcement. I want to bring Xander Schultz back into the conversation. Xander, I do have to say, as I watched these clips from the hearing, my thought was, I sure as hell hope Democrats can hold the line on DHS funding. And that's not necessarily an easy thing for me to say. I served at DHS in 2 presidential administrations, and I was on the funding committee that used to fund the DHS budget. It was my goal to get that bill through Congress, to do good things, to fund the Department of Homeland Security to protect the American people. But we have now had multiple sitting members of Congress in these hearings say the Department of Homeland Security is a danger to the American people. Chris Murphy basically said that this week. Extraordinary. Chris Murphy is not a man known for reckless hyperbole. He says the Department of Homeland Security, if funded, is a danger to the American people. And you know what, Xander? I've got to agree with him. You're on mute.
Almost made it through the show. It's 3 o'clock. We should be out of here.
It's got to happen, yeah.
I was going to say it's pretty obvious by now. Look, I think we should assume they do have a database and we know how to keep each other safe. Make sure we're all in it. Keep showing up at the protests. Keep recording these guys. The safety is in numbers. A British officer said during Gandhi's assault marches that we were prepared for violence. What we were not prepared for were for millions to refuse to cooperate. They can't jail us all. And so if they're building a database based on who's taking freaking pictures of these guys, let's all take some pictures. That's the way we stay safe. That's the way we get through this.
Amen. Thing. Hell yes. Because we're running into overtime, let's jump into questions. We weren't able to yesterday because I had to fly into Washington. Let's jump here. Let's see. We've got, oh, shoot. I skipped over something. Our producer's probably like, what about who's joining the Defiance? Let's hit our favorite segment of the day. Who is joining the Defiance? Let me start there, and then we're going to take questions. Feel free to drop them into the chat. Today's Who is Joining the Defiance, we're calling back to a heartbreak of the 2024 election at a time when celebrity endorsements carried such weight. A newfound queer icon and pop star of the moment, Chappell Rowan, noticeably refused to endorse either side, saying, there are so many things that I would want to change, so I don't feel pressured to endorse someone. There's problems on both sides. Well, it seems like Chappell has finally taken a stand. Take a look.
And there's new public backlash this morning against LA 28 Chairman Casey Wasserman. Singer Chappell Roan is leaving his talent agency after he was named in the latest batch of Epstein files. NBC4's Lauren Coronado is live outside of Wasserman's offices in Westwood. So, Lauren, Roan is now the first major artist to depart the agency.
Lynette, good morning. Yes, she is cutting ties, and now we'll see if other high-profile artists will follow suit. Right now, we're in Westwood outside the agency's building. You might be able to see it just over my shoulder. I know it's dark out, but you'll be able to make out the name right there. We know Wasserman is also the chair of LA 28, a sports and entertainment powerhouse, facing backlash on both fronts. Now, here's the message from Grammy Award-winning artist Chappell Roan. She announced on Instagram she will no longer be represented by Wasserman, the talent agency led by Casey Wasserman, adding, the decision reflects my belief that meaningful change in our industry requires accountability and leadership that earns trust. Variety is reporting multiple artists are looking into leaving the group, which represents, like we said, quite a few of those high-profile artists. This after Wasserman's ties to the Epstein files. Emails with convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell were uncovered in the files about a week ago.
I will be wearing a tight leather flying suit. I don't even know what the hell that means. But you know what, Chappell? Hats off to you. Welcome to the Defiance. Glad to see you taking a stand. It matters for artists, for ordinary Americans to stand up against all of this, as Xander noted previously. Now, Xander, we're going to jump into some viewer questions, and let's see what we got.
I was trying to get my leather flying suit on time. In time to jump back on screen. I didn't quite
picture it. I know you have one. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see it. I want to know about it. Joyce Maxwell asks, what can be done to get children out of detention centers? Joyce, look, one of the things that I will say is there needs to be support for these groups that go represent these families. And I will say that there's an unfortunate truth here. The unfortunate truth here is some of these families, nothing can be done to get them out of detention. They have final orders of removal, not just from the Department of Homeland Security, but from a judge who has concluded they are not lawfully here in the United States and will get deported. And I think that's unfortunate because that also, I think, is preventable. but it required us doing something years ago, which is reforming our immigration system to allow people to stay here who want to be Americans. We should be proud that so many people go on one of the most dangerous journeys in the world to come to this country. Did you know that 1 in 3 women are sexually abused on the journey into the United States to come and be here? They willingly take on that journey to get to a better life. Congress, Washington failed all of us by not fixing that problem when it could have on multiple occasions. And now those people who have final orders of removal, who should be removed under the law, shouldn't have been, because we could have prevented that. Now, that said, there are obviously a lot of people in ICE custody who should be able to contest their cases, who don't necessarily have final orders of removal from a judge, who are being swept up into the ICE dragnet, and who we should fight for. And one of the ways we can do that, and that we have been as an organization, defiance.org, is supporting the groups that are protecting those people. And we pointed the other week, Joyce, to some legal aid groups in Minnesota. I will say, in your own state or in states where you're concerned about what's happening, a lot of them have immigrant rights and advocacy organizations. Those lawyers can make the difference between a child, a mother and father, remaining in custody and getting deported and getting released and fighting and being in this country. That is really, really important, is supporting those groups. I think rhetorically supporting those folks, sending them solidarity is really, really crucial. But one of the things we're going to continue to be focused on this year is crowdsourcing support to get those people out of detention. I'm going to tell you one more thing that Xander doesn't know about yet, but that we're going to do as an organization. I briefly texted him about this today, but I know he's going to be in agreement. We are going to be teaming up with a number of organizations in this space to go out there and crowd cancel these warehouse detention centers that they are trying to set up around the country to treat immigrants exactly like Todd Lyons said he wanted to treat them. He wants to turn them into the Amazon Prime for human beings. It's very fitting that their decision is to go buy a bunch of warehouses and stick these human bodies, these flesh and blood breathing human bodies, in warehouses to remove them like Amazon packages. Well, we're going to go around the country and help crowd cancel these warehouses to stop that from happening, to stop these modern gulags from being created. And we're going to work with other people in the ecosystem. And as long as our defiance.org members feel passionate about that, we can help make that happen. And you just saw it the other week in Virginia. In the state of Virginia, hundreds of people showed up at a local meeting to an all-Republican county commission and said, hell no, we're not going to let one of the warehouses in this town be turned into an ICE gulag. And you know what? They reversed the decision. That is not going in there. That can be repeated a dozen times, 24, 100 times around this country to make it difficult for them to turn these human beings into a conveyor belt of repression. Xander, would love to get your reaction to that, because I didn't consult you before concluding today. We were definitely going to find a way to be a part of that effort and campaign.
You know my justice reform background. You know I'm rocking with that strategy. I got a bunch of old friends to enroll in that fight. You're totally right that there's tried and true strategies on stopping the erection of prisons or detention centers in this case. Whether or not there's a mandate to remove these people from the country, there is still an obligation, Miles, as you point out, to treat people with dignity. And that's one thing our justice system has done poorly for years. You know, out of the 2 million people incarcerated, over 400,000 are awaiting trial. It's pre-trial. You have a right to a speedy trial in this country. And we have more people in prison that are awaiting trial than the entire country of Japan has in prison, period. So we've been failing on this front of allowing people to suffer in these ways that have nothing to do with justice, that have nothing to do with running you through a trial, coming to a conclusion, and getting you to whatever services or place you need to be. We've tolerated it for a long time. We're seeing it grow and morph into these new cruel ways. If we can't organize around stopping the suffering of children, we're lost. And I believe we can in this country. I believe we can organize around that. There needs to be more whistleblowers. We know the power of footage. We saw it with Renee Good. We saw it with Alex Preddy. It's hard to get into these places, but we're starting to see some videos and photos emerge, and they're reprehensible. We need those moments. We need those people playing their part. We need COs and other folks that are forced to do this terrible job to turn their back on immorality and step up for us. And then we need to organize in every way available to us to stop the suffering of children. We let off this call talking about Epstein and the suffering of children. We're ending this about this suffering of children in detention centers here. This cannot be a hallmark of how this nation is behaving. And I think Trump is overplaying his hand here. I think if there's one thing, we talked about the Epstein issue being a promise he made to his following. If there's one thing actually Americans can agree on, it's they want to protect children. In that call I mentioned earlier with that Republican candidate, he said, look, all I want to do is protect children. He was talking about not getting them hurt at a protest, but it's like this baseline agreement we can make as Americans. Let's do it across the board in all the ways we can. I believe they're overplaying their hand. I believe he's underappreciating how many swing voters care about this issue and will not align themselves with the party again. I think we're seeing it show up already at these special elections, and it's going to continue to show up. So, man, like I said when we were talking to Krasner, I don't have a ton of time. You don't have a ton of time, but we got time for this. So let's go do it.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. And we're going to. And I got to tell you, I have seen some of these facilities, not a lot of them, a handful, firsthand, and they're not a place for kids. They're not a place for anyone. We are talking about concrete slabs that people sleep on. And it bears reminding that these are people who, many of them, slept in the desert, slept in harsh conditions, were abused, were mugged, were raped on the journey to get here, to be a part of the United States. And now we're putting them back in those conditions to kick them out. I got to tell you, in a moment when America's popularity is through the floor, we should be flattered that people are still willing to fight through hell to be in this country. And some of those people who fought that hard to be in this country are bigger fucking patriots than the people who are doing this to them. People who've taken those jobs in the Department of Homeland Security to remove them and are ungrateful for what they have. So I would agree with you, obviously very strongly, Xander, that something needs to be done there. And here's the real sick point of the whole thing. This doesn't have to happen. You could be a conservative like me and see immigration enforcement and say, well, in general, we have to enforce the law. And if someone came in illegally, we have to remove them. But you know what also can happen? The United States Congress, right now, at this very moment, at 6:16 Eastern on a Tuesday, could get together and pass an immigration reform bill. Pass a reform bill to stop all of this right now and say, here it is. Here's the pathway to citizenship, and we're going to make some trades, and we're going to increase border security. There has been a deal potentially on the table for 15 years in Washington that everyone knows is the rough construct that will get both sides to the table. And there has not been the political courage to do it. And the biggest coward in that fight has been Donald Trump. And I'll tell you why. Because he likes a badge and a gun. He likes the power. And he doesn't want to give those people a pathway to citizenship, because then, you know what, Xander? He doesn't get to stick them in warehouses. He doesn't get to forcibly arrest them and jostle them around. And he doesn't get to throw them out of this country by their necks. He doesn't get to do that. And that's what we need to remember about this man. I don't know if we have any other questions here. We may have one in the chat. Mercedes says we do have one in the chat. Question: are there resources for helping find lawyers for protesters? Like to have a phone number in our pocket when we go to protest. Xander, you want to take that one?
The answer is yes. The National Lawyers Guild. Write it on your arm before you go to the protest. 212-679-2811. Mercedes is going to throw it up on the banner. Oh, there it is. It's right there at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, so that's the National Lawyers Guild. They can help you. They are there to support you if you do get into trouble at a protest.
Igor, that was a really great question and a very practical, actionable answer. Thank you, friends. We are well into overtime today. I will say this, folks. We strongly urge you to join tomorrow, the heart and soul of defiance.org, is not talking about the issues of the day. It's actually taking action. Tomorrow is Wednesday. We get to announce actions we are taking to fight back against Trump's abuses of power. We are going to be focused on the election. Xander, anything you want to add on that front?
Look, a lot of our members asked, where are the youth? How are they going to turn out in the midterms? How can we support them? How can we help the young people get organized, run for office, do everything they need to do to be part of this movement? We're going to talk to a number of youth leaders tomorrow to go see exactly how it's playing out. I'm sure our members are going to be excited by what they hear. They're going to be impressed with these young people, and we're going to be there to have their back and support them.
Yeah, I would also just say as parting words, folks, after the meetings I had today in Washington, D.C. with other groups fighting alongside us in this space, I came away energized and convinced that the defiance is bigger than ever. There are real things that we're going to be doing the next couple of weeks, things that we're going to be announcing, actions we're going to take. There's a lot that can be done to continue to hold this administration accountable and to turn the tide. And we are so fired up by your support. We are so grateful for you standing up and for your courage and that you're willing to stay in this fight with us. So thank you for that. Excited to see everyone tomorrow and announce this week's action. And then Thursday, join us for, who do we have, Xander, on Thursday? I had one call to action there and I had it written down. We have got
your lawyer friend. It was the other dope in the Trump text. Was that not it?
Yes, that's why I was going to say it. My lawyer friend, the other dope. On Friday, Donald Trump said these two dopes, don't pay attention to them anymore. Miles Taylor and Ty Cobb, former White House lawyer and a man of total integrity, is going to join us on Thursday. And he's going to tell you why, despite withering attacks from the president, he continues to speak out and fight for the rule of law. Hell yeah, join us Thursday to talk to Ty. And until then, stay loud, friends, stay brave, and stay together.